Welcome, friends. I was discussing with you about the United States entry into the Second World War. Before that, United States was not willing to directly involve into the war, but he was pumping a lot of arms and ammunition to the UK, and after some time, firstly they provided United Kingdom a lot of weapons, and uh, after some years and half, they gave some kind of weapon support to the Soviet Union as well to wipe out the Nazis, Germans. So this is the picture of Second World War. So when the German defeated, the Italian surrendered. Okay, the Europe war gone, and so what happened in the East Asia? Eastern Asia was dominated by the Japan, and Japan was not willing to surrender. Japan was not willing to surrender. He was occupying, and he was very brutal as well. Japanese Japanese action was very brutal. He was raping the women, and as they exploited the South Korean women largely, and they have done great damage to China. Well, I don't have the word what they have. They were very brutally acted, unethical, immoral acts they have done in the past in the Second World War. That's this book is saying that. Uh, Past, why I am telling you about this. It is not for any kind of examination purpose. It is just for your knowledge purpose. Uh, how the humans has done in the past to the curse the humanity and human nature. What humans have done in the past, they have developed, they have crossed many developmental missions, but they have also, at the second hand, they have done great damage and immoral acts as well in the history. So, see, but my topic is the United States entry into the war, attack on the Pearl Harbor. The US had still not directly entered the war. In July 1941, the Japanese had occupied Vietnam in Indochina. In October 1941, an even more aggressive government came to power in Japan. It was headed by the General Hideki Tozo. The Japanese made preparation for launching another act of aggression, this time in the Pacific. On 7th December 1941, the Japanese bombers attacked the US naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. On 7th December 1941, the Japanese attacked the US naval base. Okay, so Japanese actually done this. The US had expressed a expected the US had expected a Japanese attack on the British and Dutch colonial positions in the area, and was completely taken by the surprise because the USA was not involved in the war. He got surprised when they attacked the naval base of the United States. Okay, in the bombing, 188 aircraft, and many battleships, cruisers, and other naval vessels of the USA were destroyed, and over 2,000 sailors and soldiers killed by the Japanese forces. The Japanese losses were minor. The US forces naval base registered, but the minor damage they done to the Japanese side. But Japan has done great damage to United States. On 8th December, the US declared war on Japan. 8th December 1941, US declared war on Japan. On 11th December, Germany and Italy declared war on USA, and USA declared on Germany and Italy. Okay. So actually, these three attacking powers, racist powers, Japan, Germany, and Italy, was I told you that they had signed a joint pact. If anyone gets attacked by the other countries, they all will support to each other and will fight back. This was their tripartite act. So once the USA attacked, declared the war against Japan, that means that the Germany and Italy also came into the direct conflict with the USA. So that's the war began right now. There was three powers. One side, right now, the USA, Soviet Union, and UK on the one side, and the second side is the Japan, Italy, and Germany on the one side. Okay, so their colonial states also get affected by these. So 3 and 3 powers was divided. The match is going to have the 3 and 3 teams. So look at what happens next. The global war. The events of 1941, the German invasion to the Soviet Union, the Japanese attack on the Pearl Harbor, and the US entry into the war made the war a truly global war. Okay. You know, the continent of American continent is also involved right now. Their colonial areas is also into the war, and these states are, because these states was powerful, so they had made colonial states. So right now everyone is on the virile of wars. Okay. So by the middle of 1942, Japan has occupied many islands in the Pacific: the Philippines, Indonesia, Burma, Malaya, Singapore, and Thailand. During this period, they emerged the anti-fascist coalition comprising Britain, the Soviet Union, and the USA. The Winston Churchill called it as Grand Alliance. Britain and US waged the war against together under joint command. Okay, so they made the Grand Alliance. Though there was not much joint action with the Soviet Union, they were not too much associated with Soviet Union. All the three countries actively collaborated and on many occasions planned common strategies. Besides the vast resources of the USA, her entire war machinery, which includes 300,000 aircraft, 300,000 aircraft and 85,000 tanks, were now geared up against the Germany and her allies. The USA has been described as the arsenal of the victory. The Soviet Union recognized General D. Gaulle, who later set up a provisional government into the as the leader of the Free Frenchmen. Okay, the Battle of Stalingrad. Throughout 1942, the war in Europe was fought almost exclusively between the Soviet troops and the German troops, and the forces of the country, such as Romania and Bulgaria, allied to Germany after the German attack on Moscow had been repulsed. The German troops advances deep into the Caucasus. In March 1942, Hitler had asserted that the Red Army would be annihilated. Okay, would be annihilated into the summer of this month or summer of this year. In July, means I'm talking about 1942. In July, the German troops launched an offensive on Stalingrad, now the Volgograd, and by mid-September they reached the outskirts of that city. Then began what has been called the greatest single trial of the strength of the Second World War. By the middle of the November, the German armies were in and around Stalingrad. Bitter fighting had been now on the street of the Stalingrad for every inch of the territory. In late November, the German armies in and around Stalingrad were encircled by the Soviet troops and they could find no way to escape. Okay, no supplies could reach them. General Paulus, who commanded the encircled German army, reported on 24th January 1943 that among the surviving German troops were about 20,000 wounded who were unattended and another 20,000 who were suffered from the frostbite. They had no weapons and were starving. On 31st January, they surrendered. The Battle of Stalingrad lasted for 5 months and had reduced the city to rubble. The German defeat in this battle has been described as the greatest defeat in history that a German army has undergone. Germany and the countries allied to her lost all 300,000 troops in the battle. About 90,000 of them survived the battle and they were taken as prisoners. In July 1941, the Soviet government had appealed to Britain to open a second front by invading France so that the German strength concentrated against her could be diverted. This request was not agreed by Britain. In May and June 1942, the Soviet government again appealed to the US and Britain for opening a second front. The US president was willing, but finally both Britain and the US decided to send troops in northern Africa instead. The reason advanced was that they, Britain and the US, were not were not at equal to the task of launching a frontal attack against the German forces in Europe. This led the Soviet Union to believe that Britain and the US, wanting to bleed the Soviet Union white so that they could preserve their forces and emerge supreme in the later stages of the war. After the German debacle at Stalingrad, however, there was a great coordination among these three powers. The German and Allied troops launched another massive military operation against the Soviet army in the middle of 1943, but they suffered a crushing defeat in August 1943, losing about 500,000 troops. This is known as the Battle of Kursk. After that, they were steadily shoved back, and by January 1944, they began to retreat from all sectors of the Eastern Front. लतिया के बाहर निकाल दिया. The war in Northern Africa and the Pacific. Okay, so I will tell you in my next video, because I am telling you each and every topic of the world affairs through my this great YouTube platform. This is very wonderful platform, and I would say the opportunity to express our views to my viewers, correct and rightfully. Thank you very much.